The crematoria were working overtime. The whole sky was bright red, and the chimneys were spewing particles into the air, and the smell was absolutely horrendous. And the woman who was carrying the bucket with me said, "Another transport must have arrived. These are our people going through the chimneys." I heard it all, I saw it all. I don't know what happened to me. I just tried to look inward, and I don't think I was consciously on this earth. So eventually we were taken to the railroad trestle by a Nazi guard. And the railroad trestle and the area where people were gathering to get into the cattle cars, they were loaded with people. They were all Hungarians. They had been worked practically to death. They had open legs. They could hardly stand. They were all going back to Auschwitz. And we were part of that. We were going to go back to Auschwitz because in the camp before, when we were going to work in that camp, the German Meister had decided he didn't like anybody to work for him who wore eyeglasses. And I wore eyeglasses. And so did Stenner, my friend Stenner from Prague. Bushy didn't wear eyeglasses. Maybe he didn't like her face. So he picked out a number of people who were not going to work in his factory, who were going to be sent back to Auschwitz. I don't know. I thought that was the end. And we had to wait on the side of the railroad while all these Hungarians were being pushed into these cattle cars, about 60, 80 to a cattle car. They were going to Auschwitz. They were not going to be selected anymore. They were going to go right into the gas. There was a woman guard who was responsible for the 8 or 10 of us. She was different. She didn't scream. She didn't use bad language. Now, is it because she was a nicer person? Or is it because the Russians were coming closer and the war didn't look so good for Germany anymore? I have no clue. But she was nice enough in her language, because the language that these people used, what they called us, I can't repeat. But she was more like a human being. So I did something I felt so badly about for a long time, till eventually my friends persuaded me I had saved their lives. I pleaded with her for our lives, especially for my life. And I told her I shouldn't be here. My father fought for Germany in World War I. He got the Medal of Honor, and I should not be here. And she said, but there's nothing I can do about it. But then she told us to just wait there. There were 2 German soldiers accompanying the train. The SS had left. They had put all these Hungarians into the cattle cars and locked the cattle cars. So these 2 German soldiers were a little distance away from the last car, and the guard that I had begged for my life with was flirting with them. And then one of them came over, a very young man, and he said something like, "Would you please?" And I thought he was talking to somebody else. This is not a language I had heard for years from the Nazis. And he told us to please follow him, and he put us in the last cattle car. And then he locked the cattle car. Cattle cars are huge. And there were just not too many people of us. I didn't know most of them. I knew Bushy and Stenner. They were my friends. I'd met them in one of the camps. And so we were trying to figure out, what are we going to do? We are going to go back to Auschwitz. But when you are turned away from work and you have to return to Auschwitz, you're not going to be selected anymore. You go right into the gas. Bushy and I spoke German. She spoke Dutch and I spoke German. Some of the Czech girls were educated, spoke German. So German was the only language we could communicate in. And the two soldiers heard us. We were holding council. We had no options. And Bushy and I decided, when we get to Auschwitz, we'll throw ourselves against the electric wire. They didn't say anything. And as soon as the train started to move, they gave us bread. They gave us cheese we hadn't seen for years. The younger one cried, and he said he didn't want to live anymore after what he had seen, what his people were doing to other human beings. I don't know how long we were in that cattle car, no idea. But eventually the train stopped. And the two soldiers opened the door and told us to hurry and follow them. We were in the mountains of Silesia with a lot of snow on the ground, feet and feet of snow. We had a thin shift on and wooden clogs and no underwear and no hair. And they told us, quick, quick, get out and follow us. And at the railroad station, it said Merzdorf, Riesengebirge. And here we were following two uniformed German soldiers. And the villagers came out of their houses. They couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. Sub-zero temperatures. And women with no hair and very lightly dressed and wooden clogs following two uniformed German soldiers. They took us to a factory which was more or less in Merzdorf. It said Kramster, Mettner and Frane. They were making linen for the war effort from flax, from the raw material of flax. And we were going to work there. We didn't know what they were making, but that's what it turned out. It was a huge factory yard, and they told us to go into the corner and stay there. And they asked for the commandant of the camp. Erna Rinke was the most cruel, awful human being I have ever seen in my life.